If you want to learn something about gardening in the Antarctic, Barnsdale is the place to be this week. We always seem to get at least one dollop of this stuff every year. And quite honestly, after the mild winter we've been having, I quite welcome it, because there's no doubt about the fact that a bit of frost and snow really has a very cleansing effect on the garden, and then we'll get rid of a lot of the gardener's enemies. But there's no need for me to tell you that the best thing to do in the garden in this sort of weather is to keep off it. But I tell you what, that's certainly not going to stop us gardening today. In fact, we have a wonderful selection of colourful flowers to brighten up a cold March day.
It looks like an impressionist painter's wildest fantasy. Millions of Namwakwalan daisies stretching as far as the distant mountains. Armies of shimmering Watsonias, shocking splashes of Lampranthus. The wild flowers of the Southern Cape in all their colourful glory. 40 years ago, when Felicity Flint moved here, this was dense African bush. As she slowly cleared the scrub, she introduced native plants. The seeds of others blew in on the breeze.
Actually, the Botanical Society counted 200 species in an hour, and I was so surprised. I said, I never have time to count. I'm so busy, trying to keep the bush down.
Well, what's really stunning is the leucospermum there. Well, that's really spectacular, the pincushion bush.
Well, that leucospermum came up from seed, and very few of the leucospermums, those ones up there, I had to buy. And that's about the only thing that I have bought for the garden has been the leucospermums, because all the other things have just arrived. So I really can say this has been one of the cheapest gardens to establish, and it's such a joy to see all these things coming and finding a home.
The native wild plants grow here in such profusion because the soil is so poor. Therefore, there's very little competition from strong-growing grasses. A lesson for any would-be wildflower gardener at home. The soil's also very free-draining and dries out almost completely during the summer months. And that's when many of the native plants go dormant. Annuals like this Ursinia put all their energy into seed production, whereas the bulbous plants, like the Watsonia, retreat underground to avoid the summer heat.
I only had Watsonias for the first time about 10 years ago, and now they've spread so much, I've got difficulty finding homes for them all.
Many South African plants, like Watsonias, are of course available to British gardeners. But here, they're even more spectacular in their natural setting. Most gardeners would recognise the humble pelargonium. Here it grows on very dry, grassy, hot banks. The leaves are full of oils, which help to reduce water loss and deter grazing animals. They give the plant a wonderful fragrance as well, and give it its common name, the rosy pelargonium. In the driest part of the garden, the succulents thrive. Like these Lampranthus, there's a wide range of colours, from this startling red right the way through to this pale pastel mauve. At home, we know them as a summer bedding plant, but we're going to have to provide that free-draining soil and a warm, sunny location in order for them to do well. And you don't need a huge wildflower garden to use indigenous plants. Some suburban gardeners in the Cape are using them in more familiar settings. Anne Dew has replaced her roses and rhodos with native ericas and arum lilies. But they're not everybody's cup of tea.
You know, you put them in the garden and you think, oh dear, it looks almost like a weed, wait and see what happens, and then lo and behold, you go out one day and you've got wonderful flowers. It's just so nice. They don't last that long, they're mainly spring. By the time summer comes, you haven't got a beautiful garden like everybody else has, but they don't have the surprises that I have in early spring. So. I grow only indigenous bulbs. I don't grow other bulbs. I have this Crown Maria, which is in flower at the moment. In a week or two, the whole bank will just be a mass of them. Lovely perfume. They're multiplying. If you look closely, at least a dozen of them coming up here at the moment, all in bud.
The arum lilies, the xanthodiceas, they seem to do well here as well.
Yes, they've done incredibly well. They've just multiplied all by themselves.
What sort of soil do they prefer then?
The arum seem to do fairly well in a heavyish soil. In fact, a lot of them, if they get a lot of damp, grow in the bottom of my garden where it can get very, very wet in winter, they seem to grow very prolifically.
Some of the bulbs you're growing here are actually out in the open border, aren't they?
Yes, that's a Chinkarichi, Ornithogalum thurceroides.
It's quite a big plant, isn't it?
It's got a very large flower, it's very popular as a cut flower.
Well, this is a particularly superb erica.
Yes,
I've
that's a
never
lovely
seen
one.
anything like that before.
That's Erica ceranthoides. One actually gets two ceranthoides, a red one and this one. Very easy to grow in the right situation. In this dry, hot situation, it grows quite easily. This is Erica diaphana. Very beautiful, close to my total pride and joy.
It must be. I think it would
Yes.
be mine if it was in my
Yes.
garden. These flowers look like they're covered in sugar.
Well, they are.
Tremendously sticky. Look at that.
Yes, yes. With the sun on them, they look like porcelain. They're really lovely.
And do you think you could grow it in a pot or a container?
I don't think this one, because this is a very large Erica. There are others you can, but I don't think this one would grow in a pot.
Well, it's a superb plant.
It's lovely. This one could grow in a pot. Erica halicocaba.
Don't think I've ever seen one with such large flowers as this.
Yes, no, it's quite stunning when it's in full flower. Really
It's
nice.
nothing like an erica, does it?
No, not really, no. It's very hardy, very easy to grow.
And what sort of soil does it require?
Well, I think it would like an acidic soil, like most of my ericas in this garden have.
Well, this is a superb plant. It's definitely a plant that would be interested to try at home. I think we'll have to see about getting some plants and trying to grow them.
Good luck.
Some of the most attractive gardens in the Cape don't just use indigenous plants. Like this one, they use a mixture of plants from around the world. It's a perfect example of how, by choosing the right plants in the right conditions, almost anything is possible. How do you maintain scorching summer winds, blistering sun and very little rain? The local climate can devastate gardens here in Capetown. So Leslie Edkins has created a succession of microclimates. She's become expert in successfully growing plants that really shouldn't thrive here.
As you can see, we use a lot of shrubs as protection and make it up as hedges. And by using a lot of the shrubs which have got nice foliage colour, you've got colour all year round. It also protects it from the prevailing winds. And then, of course, I can grow a lot more of the exotic and delicate plants in front of it. So then, of course, you do a lot of variety in the garden.
I see that your shrubbery's tiered, starting with a large bottle brush there, then going down to some of your ericas and the cestrum, right down to all the annuals.
Well, you know, it just makes a lot more interesting in a garden instead of actually just looking at something that's absolutely flat. I love making features in a garden, and I also like sort of having little nooks and crannies so that you don't actually see the whole garden all at once.
Well, I've noticed the garden is very densely planted. I mean, that must take a lot of plants in itself.
Well, if you actually look at it, a lot of them are perennials, a lot of them are the shrubs. I grow a lot of the shrubs, as I say, for the protection from the wind. And by growing it too very close together, you're also keeping the moisture in. And you get very much more of an impact growing close together. I am not all that fond of actually looking at the soil. I prefer to look at my plants. This is my area which is the coolest part of my garden, and I can grow all my ferns that I enjoy growing here, and my shade-loving plants.
Well, this tree fern seems to be thriving.
This is the Australian tree fern, and I actually bought it 5 years ago, and it was about 6 inches tall.
5 years? I can't imagine it growing that fast at home.
Well, it's just in the right place, it's got the right conditions, and it thrives.
So it doesn't dry out here, although it's in full sun?
No, not at all. The roots are always wet, and this, of course, is what ferns enjoy.
With the experience that you've had in your garden here, if there was a lesson that you had to give to a visitor about gardening, what would it be?
Never give up. There's a right place in every garden for every type of plant, and with perseverance and looking after it, and not being scared to move that plant even as much as 5 times, you will find the right place, and then have a just reward with it.
Now, I've just bought this bunch of carnations for my wife for purely romantic reasons. Well, I got them wholesale, and I also noticed that there are 1 or 2 good side shoots on them. And of course, these will make very good new plants. They're very easy. All you do is just pull them off like that, and then just trim below a leaf joint. I'll do that one there. Take a few of the bottom leaves off using a sharp knife like this. I also like to just compensate for the great shock this plant has had by taking a few of the top leaves off as well, and that of course is a perfect cutting. You then dip it into hormone rooting powder and then put it into a mixture of 50-50 coir and vermiculite. Like that. Now I'll put probably another 3 cuttings into this pot, and then put it into a gently heated propagator, and that will root quite quickly. Now, in fact, these cuttings here were rooted, what, just 28 days ago. Yes, you can see there that they've got quite a nice little root system already. So they're really ready for potting up. So they can be gently teased out of the compost, and look at that, really very nice. And then that is potted into a compost which consists of 75% coir, 25% bark, and a little bit of grit, and some slow release fertiliser too, and that will get away really well. Now those can be grown on and potted on until they're in about a 9-inch pot. And if you've got a cool greenhouse or a conservatory, it's very easy to produce flowers right the way through the year. They're actually called perpetual flowering carnations, and they're well named. This plant, which was also produced from a cutting from a bouquet, has been flowering on and off throughout the whole of this year, and you can see that it's coming up for another flush of flower right now. Now, if you can't go to all that trouble, or you haven't got a romantic husband like me, then you can buy perpetual flowering carnations, mail order, and they come in some very lovely colours, including things like this yellow, and the picotee, and the white. Of course, keeping a succession of colour in the winter is perfectly easy in the greenhouse, but it can be a bit baffling, particularly for beginner gardeners outside. But Gay Search has come up with a quick and easy recipe that should solve your problems.
It's on precisely this kind of cold, damp, rather misty winter's day that you really long for a bit of colour. But of course, in most gardens, that's exactly the time of year where you really don't get very much. In this small garden, that corner is what you see from the house. So what we're going to do today is plant up a bed full of colourful shrubs that really will give your spirits a lift at this time of year. And because in a small garden everything really has to earn its keep, they're all plants that look really good the rest of the year as well.
You'll need 1 Cornus alba elegantissima, 1 variegated false castor oil plant, 1 Japanese mahonia, 1 Sarcococca humilis, 3 euonymus emerald gaiety, 1 Viburnum Gwendleyan, 3 Euphorbia robbii, 3 Virginia Bressingham white, 5 small or 3 large Christmas roses. You'll also need composted bark, slow-release fertiliser and chipped bark for mulching.
Well, now we've dug this corner out, we can see basically what the soil's like, and it's really not up to much. It's very, very fine, sandy, dry. Part of the reason is that's the nature of the soil round here, but the other culprit is this enormous conifer hedge. That's sucking an awful lot of moisture out of this area. So what I'm going to do is dig in lots of organic matter, because that will make the soil much more moisture retentive and will give the plants we've chosen a much better start.
Depending on what your soil's like, it should take 2 to 3 hours to mark the bed, dig it out and work in some organic matter.
Although you've got a planting plan, it's not until you actually get the plants onto the soil that you can see what they're really going to look like. And this is the time to make any final adjustments while they're still in their pots. Sometimes it's just a minor change of position, but other times you might think one group of plants looks better in a different place. Well, now's the time to do it.
It should take about an hour to put all the plants in.
Well, now the plants are in, this is the final step of all, mulching, which means basically covering the soil to keep the weeds down and also to keep the moisture in. I'm using this lovely stuff today. It's
Chipped bark.
It's really chunky, which means that slugs don't like it very much, and nor do cats. And cats are a bit of a problem in this area, but this stuff's so big that they just don't like getting it in their claws. Well, that's certainly a lot more cheerful, isn't it? It's just 15 months since we planted this bed and it's already looking very good. There's certainly a lot more colour here now. There's lots of spring flowering bulbs that we planted last autumn. The little daffodils there, and the pretty little white crocus snow bunting, blue anemones, and this really stunning little blue crocus. This one's called Blue Pearl, and it really does have a lovely pearly gleam to it. There's colour from the winter flowering shrubs as well. The sweetly scented pale lemon flowers of the Mahonia are just beginning to go over now, but there's still plenty to come from the viburnum. This one is Viburnum tinus Gwenlean, which makes a smaller, neater shrub than the ordinary Viburnum tinus, and it has pale pink flowers rather than pure white. There's still lots of buds on the hellebores too, so a lot more flower to come there. But of course, our little winter bed doesn't just rely on flower for its colour. We've got the lovely warm red stems of the dogwood, Cornus alba elegantissima. And on the Euphorbia robbii here, these little bracts are just beginning to take on the bright lime green colour, which really does give these dark, leathery evergreen leaves a lift. And let's not forget leaves. I mean, green's a colour too, after all. We've got the lovely big glossy leaves of the false castor oil plant. And in front of it, the very small, very pretty pale cream and green variegated Euonymus emerald gaiety. And all together, they really do give this corner a lift and bring some much needed cheer into the winter garden.
In my ornamental kitchen garden, despite the snow, the vegetables are growing away well. Because, of course, a couple of weeks ago I put out some cloches, so the soil is still nice and warm and dry. I've got broad beans growing in here. They're planted about 4 inches apart, round the edge of the cloche, so that later on I'll be able to support the whole lot with one cane in the middle. And it's exactly the same thing with the peas. Now, they were all sown in plastic modules and planted out here, and I did the same thing with the radishes that are under the bell cloche, but I planted those just as close as I could get them. And I did the same with the spring onions underneath my homemade bell cloche too. Now, I was going to start sowing underneath the cloches this week, but I've decided that it would be sensible to leave that for another week. But there's one thing that I really must do. Every year I have a competition with my brother Tone to see who can produce the earliest potatoes outside. Now, I know he's going to be setting his seed potatoes this weekend as soon as the snow goes, so I must get a head start on him. And of course I can do that because I've had my cloches out here warming up the soil and keeping it dry. Now, I've already prepared the ground here with a good bucket of compost and a handful of pelleted chicken manure. And I'm using a new variety of potato called Swift. I haven't tried this before, but I have very high hopes that it might be the earliest of them all. And all you do is to plant it as deep as you can with a trowel, just one tuber right in the middle of the cloche. And that should get away really well. It's a jolly good way, actually, of growing potatoes in amongst the flowers, because it does produce a very attractive foliage plant and a good crop too. If you're growing many more potatoes on the allotment, of course you have to find a very much cheaper way, and you do it with clear polythene. But first of all, you make up a series of mounds in the soil about 1 foot high and 2 feet apart, and you cover them with the clear polythene, held down tightly with these bits of wood. That will keep them very much warmer, and when it comes to planting time, you take off the polythene and plant in much the same way as before, setting the tubers right in the tops of the mounds like that, round about 1 foot apart. Now then, when you finish planting, you recover with the polythene, and this will stay on now right the way through until you harvest the potatoes. So it's important to keep an eye on the plants, and as soon as you see foliage coming through, you cut a slit in the polythene, just help it through, and that will give you the earliest and the biggest crop possible. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.